You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
How do you respond to Republicans who are saying that you let Andrews get away with murder?
Well, let's begin by saying that the crime that was committed and the death, of course, heinous, and something that someone should have the book thrown at them for. The fact is that what he's been charged with would result in, if convicted, 14 years in prison without possibility of parole. Not every crime will have first-degree murder as the charge that gets brought against somebody. But I am at least pleased that he's been apprehended and that he will be prosecuted on those crimes.
Welcome back. Senate Democrat Robert Peters joins us now from Chicago. Welcome back to Springfield.
Definitely. Thanks, Mark.
Good to have you. We were just talking with Senator Barackman, and many of our viewers may remember you were instrumental in helping to pass the four pillars of the Black Caucus agenda, but also the one of those pillars that had to do with criminal justice reform and with police reform and the crime in general, justice. I guess we'll ask you to respond to Richard Irvin's comments, who's running for governor as a Republican. He wants to be tough on crime, and we asked Senator Barackman the same question. Do you see any link at all between passing this crime bill and 8 police officers who were shot in 2021 in Illinois, shot and killed?
No, I don't see a connection there. I think that what we are seeing a connection to is that this type of rhetoric is going to ramp up in 2022. We're going to just see more and more attacks, particularly on this Black Caucus pillar, and I get it. We've seen this in history. This is a sort of an old-fashioned playbook, and I know that particularly for the mayor of Aurora, that he needs to do whatever he can to appeal to the base that he needs to be able to win, and I think that's part of the play here because, to be honest with you, I think he made some different comments in the past around things like Black Lives Matter. So he went from Black Lives Matter a year ago to All Lives Matter this year, which seems like an inconsistent change. But no, I don't necessarily see a connection right there.
Yeah, that's a sensitive, I think it can, look, politics in Illinois especially, I don't know if any state has more racially charged politics, if I can say that.
Well, I would say there's some states that have some very serious racially
well,
charged
I guess
politics.
if we're going to the South, yeah,
Yes.
but the country's history on race has often come through Illinois. And I think a lot of our leaders on this issue have come through this state. And that's why it's interesting. He's running to be the first Black Republican governor, the first Black governor in the land of Lincoln, and launched his campaign on Martin Luther King Day to make that point, that he's the descendant of a slave. What did you make of that timing?
I mean, I just think that's an important day in American history. And especially as for myself, I look up to Dr. King and his organizing. I particularly look up to Abraham Lincoln and the work that he did as president. And I think that it was really, particularly, I would say, I don't think it was the right move for him to do that. And again, I know what he was trying to go for. I know what he's trying to hit at. I don't necessarily agree with it. We made a statement. We issued a statement, me and Rep. Harper and Rep. Buckner, about this. And I think we didn't really like it. But let me just make this clear. I understand it's 2022. There's going to be these types of things that happen this year. And so I get that this is part of that. Whether it's right or wrong, that's a different part of this conversation. But at the end of the day, I think it was a day that I would rather have had focused on the legacy of Dr. King and not on Richard Irvin.
We're sort of tiptoeing around this crime issue and this issue and how it relates to race, but it was the Black Caucus agenda that said, look, the justice system should protect and prevent victims. The justice system and the criminal justice should not also create victims. And it did change the rules of engagement for how police would pursue suspects or where police could detain people, right? Why was that important when you were passing that? And now that we see Governor Pritzker and Speaker Welch and saying we're going to update our crime laws to get tougher on crime, is that a signal that the original bill overstepped somewhere?
No, there's a few things I want to make sure are clear. A, it came out of a severe, repeated levels of tragedy that have happened. We must not forget George Floyd. We also have to be clear that overall crime especially in violence, is spiking everywhere. Has nothing to do with just here in Illinois. This is a crisis that's happening everywhere. There's a variety.
Some states
of
are higher than Illinois.
Huh?
Some states are higher than Illinois.
That's right. And so, and let's also make this clear. At the end of the day, it's called the Safety Act for a reason. The Black Caucus in my district, let me just use my district, and the district I represent, public safety has always been a concern. For me, fighting for public safety has always been a concern. And what we have a battle for, and what these pillars have everything to do with, is that we want public safety for everybody and not a few. And what we can't go back to is a failed playbook of tough on crime politics. So this pillar has nothing to do with what's happening. There's a variety of other factors, and I get it. Look, let me be clear. I get it. After what has been a difficult period when Bruce Rauner was governor, the defunding of social services, the hollowing out of government, there's been studies that have been shown, Northwestern did one, I believe, that have shown that has had a cause and has had an effect on the violence that's happening in Illinois. And I would say, if we're gonna have this conversation about public safety, let's ground it in the facts, let's ground it in the data, and let's stay away from the old-fashioned heated rhetoric of the past.
I enjoy when we can shift back and forth between politics in a campaign year and the policies that actually affect and govern the laws themselves. So let me ask you a political question for a moment. Did the catchphrase defund the police help or hurt Democratic politics?
I think the catchphrase has not gone the way I think many people want it to go. I would say for me, my main focus is the battle is public safety for all and public safety for a few. And I think that for many people who organize in the space, inevitably everything is about making sure we have public safety. Look, I have in the district I represent, I have some of the highest rates of eviction. So I believe that we need to do whatever we can to keep people in their home. I have folks, youth in care, that struggle because they've been separated from their families. I have had this same struggle myself personally. We got to make sure that we keep people intact, that they're lifted up. I have disparities that are so painful when it comes to being able to get pay in their work. So we need to make sure we continue to lift up people's wages and we continue to make sure they have work.
Are there links between those three things you just mentioned and violence?
Oh yeah, these are system issues that we need to deal with. Look, the way it works is that when you push people to the brink, it causes this crisis. If we're not actually dealing with this crisis, we're playing games. And I want you to know something. In 8th grade, I tried to be an actor. It didn't work out very well. I'm not here to do theater. I'm here to focus fundamentally.
I can't remember who said it, but there is a famous quote, I hate to tell you, that politics is acting for ugly people.
I've heard this before. I think that was about DC and not Springfield.
Oh, okay, there's a carve out. There's a carve out for Springfield. Very interesting. But to the more serious issue that you raised about the broader issues and the way those policies can affect, I think there might be I don't know if you'd call it a political or a philosophical disagreement in this idea that the state can collectively improve outcomes or that it's on the individual. I'm going to go back to Richard Irvin for a minute if I can, because he has used that individual temerity in his own story to say, I lifted myself up. Mm-hmm. And he points to his family as mentors that helped guide him, but he's making this statement that you can come from the lowest of points with the lowest of odds and overcome and become the mayor of the second largest city in Illinois because it's up to you, and that you shouldn't have to look for. I think he used the phrase, "I'm looking not for a handout but a hand up." I don't know, how do you parse that?
I don't want to get into a battle with Richard Irving because I think that he's actually encapsulating a whole bunch of things that people believe all over the place. But fundamentally, it's kind of a combination of both. We need to be able to act, as Pope Francis would say, as the collective Samaritan. This is coming from Pope Francis' words. That yes, we're individuals, but we are part of a society, and that we need to look out for each other.
The answer can be both. It doesn't have to be either or.
It doesn't have to be either or. There is the fact that as an individual, you have some responsibility. But the problem is that a collective group of people, very powerful people, carved out the state under Rauner and have pushed individuals to the brink. And so we need to rebuild from years of bad policy. Years of bad. It's absolutely terrible. You should talk to domestic violence organizations about what happened under that budget.
We covered those stories for years.
That's right. And what they're coming back from there. Fundamentally, if we're going to have public safety for all, it's going to require all. And in order to do that, we have to understand that yes, the individual has to participate in that, but we also have to build that. We can't magically have this happen. We actually have to model that. That's our role here in Springfield, is to model what is the best that we can be for people, and that's the role of other people in leadership positions. And so I get for Richard Irvin, I think for many people, the very idea that they think, they pick themselves up by their bootstraps. But I think that we live in a space where people can't even afford bootstraps, and that's a problem.
I think I remember a similar quote. There's probably no place where a person feels the glaring light of their individual responsibility more than in a courtroom. When they're being charged, when they're being confronted and questioned by a jury of their peers. And it's in that moment, this justice system that we have, where Republicans are starting to pick at singular cases and say rhetoric, claims like, quote, Pritzker's crime bill is helping people get away with murder. That's a direct quote from the Illinois Republican Party this week. There was a story in the Chicago Sun-Times that we asked Senator Barackman to respond to. You've probably seen it. There was a man accused of starting a gunfight. In the resulting gunfire, a woman was killed. He's not accused of pulling the trigger that fired that bullet, but prosecutors wanted the grand jury to bring back charges of felony murder. They brought back different charges, and he could still face jail time. But the reason why the grand jury and the prosecutor said that felony murder was off the table was because of that crime bill, which said that you had to directly cause the murder. What was the point of restricting to directly causing murder? What was the intention there?
So I think the way to look at this is, this comes out of a variety of historical cases. Let me first say that the reform we did is relatively mild compared to many states in the country. So let me just,
on this singular issue? Because there are many issues in the crime bill.
That's on this, and it's the Safety Act, not necessarily the crime bill. But I understand that that's the talking point coming from folks. But this is a thing that, in terms of reform, has been relatively mild to most people. That's the first part. The second part is, this person's most likely going to go to prison. There's a variety of factors and ways in which someone can get charged and go to prison. He will go to prison. And the third one is that there's history here. It goes back to issues like the Central Park Five or the Lake County kids who were about to spend the rest of their life in prison for something that they really didn't do, in which they went through a whole bunch of pain and trauma. Fundamentally, this person's still going to end up going to prison, most likely, and we make sure that we don't become a place that has the Lake County Fives or the Central Park Five situations. We want to be able to do both, because what I do know, where a lot of people talk about this as theory, I live in a community that has for years, for decades, have had violence. It's perpetuated violence. We've practiced, we have had violence in my community and in the district I represent before the reforms and after, which tells us the amount of work we have to do. And I said about a year ago, it's been a year since this has been signed, I said that this is the beginning to the pathway to be able to have public safety for all. There's a lot of work that we can do, but what I won't do is play this sort of game, particularly when it comes to public safety.
Well, every time a new case comes up, and every time a prosecutor, many of them are Republicans downstate, look at a case and they say, well, we can't charge this because of that. They're going to point the light back on. I mean, that's politics, but there's also the real question of how does the system change? Let me shift to a different topic.
Actually, let me respond to that.
Sure.
It was just a week ago, I believe, that people were blaming part of the Safety Act and kept saying they couldn't do something because of something that was in the Safety Act that wouldn't.
It hadn't started yet.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a problem. That
was my next question.
Yeah.
And look, we've tried to fact check that as many times as we can on our program and in our coverage, because we think it's important to show cause and effect. If you can't do that, it's on the politician or it's on the public official to do that and prove their case. And we want to give people a fair hearing. If they're making false arguments, we want to call that out when we can. A lot of people in our audience do catch on to these buzzwords. For example, the ending of cash bail or ending of money bail. That's a question that a lot of people look at and say, oh, they're doing away with this system. I don't know if everyone is aware or if everyone has really digested that that's not for all crimes. That's not for all. There are forcible felonies that would not apply. You would still be held pre-trial. As long as the judge says so, I think a judge still has some discretion there.
Judicial discretion.
Can that list grow? Because I think there were some questions that maybe the list of forcible felonies wasn't encapsulating all of the people who might be truly immediately dangerous, both to themselves, to others, to witnesses who might go out immediately and put the witnesses in harm's way or threaten them to get out of jail. Is there a way to improve that list?
I think that's something to be able to look at, but I think the first thing that comes up here is how many people have actually been talking about that list in the wrong way. For example, under the Pretrial Fairness Act, even actually currently, I believe, aggravated vehicular hijacking, so carjacking, is a detainable offense. And
It is.
It is. That's current, and that's going to be under the Pretrial
So
Fairness
that
Act.
won't change.
But my favorite part is when people talk about this and they want to attack it, they attack that part even though it technically is already covered. It gets even, like the way that this misinformation goes, it gets even better. So, for example, under the status quo, if you've been accused of committing domestic violence or rape, you generally tend to be able to be left in the house with that person. Under the Pretrial Fairness Act, that's detainable. We expanded it to make sure that when it comes to sexual assault and domestic violence, and that's why the Pretrial Fairness Act, by domestic violence organizations, sexual assault organizations, called it criminal justice reform that puts survivor safety first. So I'm down to have conversations with people. I think many people are down to have conversations, but what we won't do is sit in a place of misinformation. I want to have a good faith conversation, because at the end of the day, the most important thing for me as a state senator is that everybody in my community, no matter their zip code, has safety, and that we don't get caught up in the same old playbook that has proven time and again that it's not working, particularly whether that's the south side of Chicago, that's Bloomington Normal, or that's Metro East. It's just been the same thing over and over again.
Well, and that's why I appreciate you coming on to explain in this expanded format. As much as I love Twitter, it's really hard to distill, and sometimes I think false impressions can spread through just the headline.
Yeah.
People don't stop to read the whole story or listen to the full discussion, so I appreciate you going through. I think we'll have some more reporting on that throughout this year, because the rest of us really want to dig in and separate fact from fiction and learn this. Before we let you go, you represent a district that another Illinois politician you might have heard of once represented, and I think...
Who's that?
Well, that's sort of a tease, what we call in the business, right?
Yeah.
But he was a president in Illinois, Barack Obama. You now represent that Senate seat that I believe was vacated by Attorney General Kwame Raoul.
Yeah.
Was there a direct line from Senator Obama to Senator Raoul to Senator Peters?
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
so
so
as you can tell, some big shoes to fill. I'm just trying to get 1/1000th.
Yeah, what's next for you, I guess? Statewide office, federal office?
My main goal here is that we have to make sure that this bill is implemented and it's implemented correctly. That we need to make sure that we move this state to have public safety for everybody. I can't think about what's next. We are in the midst, as you can see, folks are coming at this over and over again. The Black Caucus makes history. We made history compared to the whole country. We've got to do whatever we can to protect this, and we got to make sure that at the end of the day, we are able to inform the public that we are fighting, that no matter where they live, they get what they need, and that we have, and I think I've said this 800 times, it's crazy, it's a crazy line, I'm gonna say it again, public safety for all, and not a few. But you have a question you're gonna ask me, and you want me to stop talking, I can see it, you're thinking about it, go for it.
See, they're perceptive, these politicians, they know. I was holding a placeholder in my mind so I didn't lose. I was listening to you but trying to do two things at once.
I got you.
The reason I was mentioning your predecessor is because this week on Thursday, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources announced that for the first time that I'm aware of in Springfield, there will be a public display honoring the history of Barack Obama in Springfield. This is the city where he held his first political office in Springfield here, and yet we don't have any, outside of like a little plaque in the Senate, there is no public display that says he was here. This kind of stuff, there's some semantics, and there's the decorum of how you honor a living person versus how you honor someone after they're gone. But there's also a debate going on right now in the House about what statues should be erected in this building on these grounds. Is President Obama worthy of a statue in this building on these grounds?
Yes, he is, and I remember that announcement. I was in school in Kansas.
You're talking about the announcement back in 08 or 07 was it?
07.
When he said he's going to run for president.
Yeah, so I remember so many things about President Obama, but when I was a kid, I grew up in Hyde Park, and I remember his office, which is it's actually right nearby where I currently live, and me and a bunch of friends, not knowing any better, walked in randomly to try to intern, not knowing anything about the process, and then which we weren't able to intern, and I wish we were able to. And then I remember another thing. This is as we have built up. There's a Walgreens in the community. It's like the institution of Hyde Park is this Walgreens. And my friend gets in and goes, oh, Senator Obama was in there. I was like, really? That's so cool. And then, of course, I was in Kansas, and I remember when he did that big announcement. I think that we need to honor his legacy here, and I think a statue would be great. I
think I glossed over that important part of the detail is that plaque will be at the old state capitol where former President Obama gave his speech. That's also where Abraham Lincoln gave his House Divided speech, so there's that direct line. It's also where he would later, in 2008, announce that Joe Biden would be his running mate. There's a president there, too. So a lot of presidential history coming through this building and the old state capitol just across town.
Yeah.
I appreciate you joining us. We hope to have you back again sometime.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Heard you're a White Sox fan?
I'm a big White Sox fan.
I hope this year, I hope.
We just got to get Major League Baseball to get their act together.
That's right.
Hopefully there will be a season.
Yes, that'd be great.
Senator Peters, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
We're back in just a moment.